Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Beyond Badges, Why Badge Data is Not Enough in Today's World. My name is Ted Ritter. I'm the co-chair of the IT community of IFMA. We are, in fact, the oldest community of IFMA, and we're committed on providing great content around how technology supports corporate real estate and FM. In short, we want to collaborate to share the best case studies and best practices. Wanted to thank our members. We had something interesting happen over the pandemic, is that we didn't only grow a little bit, our geographic reach expanded from 16 countries to over 30. So I want to thank our members that are online with us today. It's really been refreshing to have conversations with people with different perspectives and different geographies. Also want to thank our sponsors. For this year, we have a record number of sponsors. We are providing a percentage of our sponsorship revenue to the IFMA Foundation. So thank you, all of our sponsors, and especially thank you, Freespace, today for sponsoring this webinar. Before I turn it over to Kat, a couple of housekeeping issues. This is being recorded. You will get a copy of the link. So not to worry, we always get that question, so I like to get it out ahead of time. And there's option for you to ask questions in Q&A. We love questions. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Kat and say it's going to be a great session. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Ted. Hi, everybody. I'm Kat. I'm going to be moderating today. I also happen to be from Freespace, and we're very excited to be able to sponsor this webinar. So as Freespace, we're a data and analytics company first and foremost, and we happen to have a suite of products to help us gather that data and give some insights to our clients on data-driven decision-making. So today, we're going to hear from some of our clients, our partners, and our very own Damien. So I'm going to kick it over to them shortly for an introduction, but I also am going to say a plug that we are growing in the US and we are hiring. So come find me if you if you know somebody that would love to join our team. But I'm going to kick it over to Jeff first to introduce himself, then we'll kick it over to Peter and Damien, and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks, Kat. Appreciate the invite. Appreciate being here, and thanks everybody for attending. Jeff Collins, I'm the project lead at Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, based in Baltimore and co-headquartered in DC. So pleasure to be here, and thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Peter Costanzo with ROI. We are workplace technologists. I'm thrilled to be here in several veins. I am an active member of IFMA ITC. I have the pleasure of working with Blue Cross Blue Shield as its client, and which I really we're also a Freespace partner. So lots of fun to be here.
Awesome, thanks, Peter. Damien, over to you.
Thanks, Kat. I'm Damien Chapman. I'm CRO at Freespace. I'm with Freespace for about 5 years, looking after our customer success and our application engineering team. Pleased that Kat's put the plug in that we are recruiting. I suspect there's some referral bonuses that she's after, so please do. But yeah, outside that, really pleased to be here and partnering with it.
Awesome. So today our discussion is going to be around why badge data is not enough and utilizing a lot of other data sets in the built environment to truly tell a story in your corporate environment, as well as really using it to elevate your employee experience. So with that, Jeff, I wanted to kick it off with you and ask, why has data-driven decision-making become increasingly more important in the corporate real estate world?
Well, you know, it's interesting when you tie it back to that badge data. Prior to COVID, we had 1.8 million square feet of space that was essentially empty on a given day. You know, we ran our badge reader data, and we came to the understanding based on that factual information that's coming out of the system when you're picking people up coming into the building and eliminating duplicates and all that, that our buildings were about 39% occupied generally on a given day. So when you present a stat like that to like senior leadership, it's an issue, right? It's something that has to be addressed. It's an opportunity for folks in real estate to right size and to look at things a little bit differently and kind of bring that number down. Now we're in the process of reducing by about 70% across the portfolio. So we're in 100% lease space. So old leases will be falling off, and we'll be constructing new space, hyper efficient space. Kind of a 2.0 version of activity based. to drive towards that efficiency, right? Embracing the remote work, things of that nature. As we do this, we are going to be installing Freespace sensors at all of our new locations because, we know that in the prior model, yes, it gave you a great big fat stat that, your portfolio is about 70% underutilized, which is an issue, but it doesn't give you the nuance of how the space is being utilized on a day-to-day within the space. So once somebody comes in, what are they doing? You don't have that info. You also don't pick them up as they're leaving. We don't have a RFID. It's a passive RFID system. It's more of a badge in, and we don't get you going out. So there are certain limitations there. So as a practical application, that's what we're looking at doing.
That's awesome. Peter, what are you seeing across some of your other clients as well in regards to the data sets that they're looking for?
So I never thought I'd say this when I got involved 20 years ago. It's an exciting time to be in facilities management. And one of the reasons why, from a technology perspective, we have access to all sorts of more data. So data becomes more important. The other thing that's happened, particularly as a result of the pandemic, facilities are much more mission critical. We need to, facility managers need to make sure they're elevating the employee experience. And as I talk about data and what's happening in the place, pre-COVID, everyone you talk to was trying to make their space look like Google. Remember these discussions pre-COVID a couple of years ago? And what, as we look at certain things like badge data, we need to quantify who's coming back. And we can do that. We can know what comes in. But what that doesn't tell us is where people are, and where they're congregating, what types of spaces. And technology aside, there's a whole thing where facilities and corporate managers are pushing to get people back into the office. And we've got to find those drivers and what's working. And that's an area of where sensors and other data are helping figure out what's really happening.
Absolutely. And so to build on that, Damien, would you mind kind of walking us through what are the limitations of relying solely on badge data to understand and optimize your corporate real estate portfolio?
Yeah, sure. I think Jeff touched on it to a good element there. It's knowing how many people in your building is fine, or how many people are coming through the door, but actually knowing how many people are in at any one time is a key. I mean, one example with a global insurance firm, that one of our clients that we had a QBR with a few months ago, we were running through their data and just showing how that stacked up in terms of space usage. So what was the percentage of usage of desks versus phone booths versus meeting rooms, etc. Their badge data was saying that they were averaging, or they actually had 130% capacity through the 2-week period we were running through. To which that we then kind of had a bit of a challenge session on the data where we were saying, well, actually your desks in that week were only 60% occupied. Your entire space in terms of your maximum occupancy of aggregating everything didn't touch 80%. So the fact that they were kind of citing that 130% capacity was reached by a number of people badging in, that didn't actually kind of show how that was fluctuating throughout the day as people come in at 7 o'clock in the morning and disappear out for their afternoon lunch and lunch meeting. So that's one piece. Equally, I think it's a fairly well-known stat out there that you're potentially looking at 20% of badging not being captured. So you're always going to have your limitation there. But it's definitely more around understanding the types of space that are being used. So just because I know that there's 1,000 people in the building, that has changed drastically as a result of I'll use the term because Peter's already swore and say the pandemic, but the fact that the pandemic, people were using space a certain way beforehand, that's now completely changed. So even though we know that we're sort of only at 70% of numbers through the doors that we were 2 years ago if we look at 2019 even, but the space is being used drastically different. So we know that desks, for example, across London, when I was looking at that yesterday, are being used 50% as they were 3 years ago equivalent. So people are clearly using the office for different things, which unfortunately badge data doesn't give you. That doesn't say or go to say that badge data is redundant. I think overlaying badge data with other data forms really is beneficial. So knowing who's coming through the door and what numbers your badge data are and how that correlates to space usage and then design decisions is great. But I think the point here, and I'm sure we'll all come to the same conclusion by the end of the hour, is that badge data isn't enough to make kind of those real strategic decisions.
Absolutely. And in my previous world, being direct FM, one of the things that I struggled with all the time is piggybacking, right? So if you don't have the turnstiles, you have a lot of piggybacking, people are not badging in properly. So yes, you're getting a view, but is it truly telling you a story? And with that, so Alex, I know we have a poll ready for the team. Before we kind of go deeper into the conversation around different types of data sets and using them for strategic decisions, we wanted to ask a question from everyone listening around, are you using data sets above and beyond badge data to make strategic decisions today? You could maybe yes, maybe no, maybe I don't know, but I'm curious to know how many of you are using additional data sets as well. So we'll give it a minute for everyone to kind of start answering and take a look at the responses at that point. Awesome. So kind of continuing with our conversation, in what ways does sensor data offer more comprehensive views of occupancy, space utilization, design? Damien, I know we work closely with a lot of architects and designers to make those decisions, but can you elaborate on that a little bit more? And I see that majority of is yes, which is great to hear, but there is a huge number of no's. So interesting to understand afterwards how everyone is using the data. And please feel free to use the chat, put in some data, some content in there on how you're utilizing the additional data sets. And if you're not, if you do have visibility into it, why not?
Sure, I guess, sorry, was that question aimed at me, Kat? I think it was.
Yeah, I throw that back at you from a design, strategic design perspective. Yeah. There's a lot of data and information that we can gather, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think one of our kind of global financial services clients is doing a lot of test and learning, actually. So yeah, they're doing their test and learn on the space design, but also furniture. One fun example we've had over the last couple of weeks is that they're testing out new types of furniture based on feedback they've had from their employees, saying, look, at home I've got this type of furniture and this is how I work best and this is how I want the setup. One example is actually they've installed some treadmill desks in one of their head office. So we've kind of run that for a few weeks, and actually it looks like the first challenge was that there isn't any data. There was about between 2 and 4% utilization of a treadmill desk. When we looked at it, it was the same time on a Wednesday afternoon that the desk seemed to be used. And that was because when we then looked at it, we identified that it seemed to be the same person using it at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. And then we mapped the utilization of or occupation of desks around it. And that was when the office was empty. So just because kind of the feedback was, well, if I come into the office, I want to have exactly the same setup as I've got at home, which is I go and walk for 2 hours on a call on a treadmill. It doesn't quite translate to the office when you're standing on a treadmill or walking on a treadmill even with 50 people around you looking at you like you've got 2 heads. So that's that sort of level of detail that where we can do kind of at individual space level, some of that utilization to do the test and learn before someone in the design team or the workplace experience team goes off and spends an arm and a leg on a load of new furniture when it doesn't work. Equally, another one before I kind of pass over, another example we've got is one of our clients in the UK, when we did a review of what spaces they were using. They identified that using the sensor data we had, that some of their phone booths, which they'd installed in the offices, had a dwell time of over 6 hours, i.e. someone had sat in the phone booth for a full 6-hour period. When they kind of, again, looked at that, it gave them the insight that they were forcing people to come to the office as part of their mandate. And certain people had no real, intention to be in the office. So all they would do was open the phone booth and go and sit in it. What they then managed to do, or what they then decided to do, was simply to say, well, we don't want people sitting in a phone booth for that long for a health perspective, because it can't be great for mental health sitting in an isolation zone for 6-7 hours. But what they then did was say, well, actually, we want to kind of encourage the collaboration behavior in the office. So they just pulled the power out of the phone booths themselves. So they were then forcing people. I don't suppose that certain individual was quite happy about it, but they were kind of forcing people to act in the way that they wanted in the office. So again, kind of that's kind of an element of just some of the small use cases that that space-specific data can give you an insights in terms of behavior and how certain space types are kind of contributing, or in fact at the detriment of the culture you're trying to establish within the office. Have we lost you, Kat?
I think Kat might be
Yes.
frozen.
She's frozen.
It's not very often I leave people speechless, but I think that's happened there. Jeff, kind of anything from your perspective while I think Kat wants to puts me back in the meter for the electricity.
Kat, I hope you're okay. You didn't freeze in an awkward spot, though. You look okay in the frozen pit.
She does.
So, just FYI, if you're listening. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It's interesting. We've been spending a lot of time working with the executives in the company. You know, obviously getting buy-in on the strategy, and there's a lot of nuance to it. And there's a lot of things you have to explain, and there's a lot of things that aren't black and white, right? They want data. They want data. How many people are going to come into the office when we start, you know, bringing people back? How many people are going to use this space? Why is it empty? You know, how do we, you know, what are some insights that you can provide us by way of data and information that'll support some of the decisions that you're asking us to make that have all of these, you know, impacts to culture and budget? You know, it's pretty severe. So, you know, in developing the strategy, you know, throughout 2020 and throughout 2021, benchmarking data. Somebody once told me, I think it was Holly Briggs at IA, if anybody knows Holly, she was amazing. She retired. She said, making decisions based on solely benchmarking is like driving a car, but only looking at the rear view mirror when you're doing it, right? And that statement is taken to, like, you know, from a 10 to like a 50, I don't know. It just is a completely, it's so true, you know, given pre-COVID and post-COVID and now what we're looking at. So we ended up building the first part of our, you know, our journey in converting our space was constructing a 220,000 square foot headquarters in Baltimore. It's a completely different design than any of the legacy spaces. The legacy spaces were very much full of cubes. They're very, very beige, lots of beige. No, every office is blocking the windows, and we've moved into this very progressive layout, right? It's a giant experiment. It's a massive petri dish. It's I hate the word, but I'll throw it out. I'll use it. Unprecedented. You know, we've never been in a time, you know, that we're in now. So there's no information. I can't provide data when they ask for data on how the space is being utilized. Once we have sensors throughout the entire space, we have it on one floor of Canton. We're going to be putting them all over. That gives you that real-time insight. So you can take the information after they've been up and, you know, feeding information to your dashboard, you know, over the course of weeks and months. It gets better as time goes on. Obviously, you can start to get trends. But we can go back to them and say, here's how it's being used. And this is based on sensors. So this is not anecdotal, like, well, nobody's ever in there. Or, you know, our badge data is saying that there's 1,000 people in this building and, you know, there's only seats for 850. What's going on with that? It's definitive, it's nuanced, it's specific, and it's, you know, it helps you walk in with confidence when you're asking, you know, executives to make these calls.
That's great. So if I heard you correctly, Jeff, then it's really contributing to those more informed decisions from a perspective of leadership, really making data-driven decisions and understanding the story that we've been telling them, but backed with data to really kind of explain it in a way that showcases what's happening in the offices in a different way, right?
Absolutely.
From the conversations that you're having with your executive team, the data that you're showcasing, are they really utilizing it for those data-driven decisions? Is it making it easier for them to make those informed decisions?
You know, we've taken models of what it will be. So we have it on one of our working floors now. When we have it on all the floors that we have open, when we expand that pilot, it'll give us that comprehensive picture. But we have taken forward, you know, just for business case purposes, you know, this is the kind of information that we're going to get out of these sensors. And this is going to allow you to make these decisions around, well, do we like that type of workstation? You know, the CEO could say, well, I hate that workstation. But we could then say, well, that specific workstation type is the most heavily utilized in the company because of, you know, we have this information. Otherwise, we wouldn't, you know, be able to make that statement. And just real, the other, it's a bit broader, but so we went down the road of creating this space, 220,000 square feet of an experiment. Nobody knows how it's really going to be utilized in the longer term. We do have, it's a lease space, 15-year lease. At certain points in that lease, we have the ability to contract, right? Or to get to, you know, ROFOs and whatever else, get more space. with this information, we can definitively say in, 5 years, whenever that option, surfaces, we can give back 2 floors. We can confidently say that we can give back 2 floors. We can give back those 2 floors specifically because we have those insights documented in data. Otherwise, we'd be kind of like anecdotal badge data, who uses it, who's on there, it'd be much more squishy. And this is much less squishy, to use a term that somebody put in my ear once.
I like it. I might steal that one.
Squishy.
If I could add to that, we worked with 2 clients that had a period of hypergrowth. And the badge data showed that they were at 100% occupancy. And when we really took a look at the floor plan and what was happening with both of these organizations, marketing had their area and finance had their area. And when we took a look at it, we found that literally, the cabinets that go on the end of a cube farm, they took the cabinets out on one side of the floor and they were double occupancy at most of the desks. And on the other half of the floor, there were 4 people sitting there. And as you talk about that, things like badge data, you're all in there, but a sensor would kind of tell you that right away. Back to Damien's example earlier, in New York City, we're based, so occupancy is important. Real estate's expensive, so we do a lot of work in this area. But a large entertainment company we worked with pre-COVID actually went and did sensors. And when COVID hit, they said to me, hey, we're going to want to put sensors in all sorts of other spaces, like the conference rooms where they didn't have them, to figure out, hey, what the use is going to be when we come back to drive. Similarly, also to Damien's point, and my kind of making fun of the industry that everyone wanted to kind of look like a technology company, we had several clients that in the technology world that had invested in sleep pods and those treadmills that, Damien, you pointed out one person was using. They didn't work in that no one was using them. But the badge data doesn't tell you that. You've got to have a sensor to tell you what's happening in that space to see where those things are happening.
Yeah. And Peter, from your perspective, how do you think that using data and analytics is going to really shape the future of the corporate real estate industry?
I think we're going to be able to make better and more informed decisions about what to do. And I know one of the future things, I think there's going to be, for example, I think energy management within all of this is going to be huge as we look at different data sets. If you look at a reservation system, it gives you an idea who's coming in. And if you got several floors in a building, you can use that to, stack your floors and fill people as they come in, right? But also you save energy, and then people aren't working by themselves. There's not 4 people on one floor plate, which is incredibly depressing, as organizations are trying to get back into the office. But if you take a look at that, you can drive your energy usage saying, hey, what floors do I think I'm going to need to turn on? And when, as you're looking at that. And I think, as we talk about metering and energy savings, the world is moving more to a floor-based level. I think we're going to see over time the technology is going to be cost effective enough to go down to different levels like workspaces and conference rooms and things like that. And I believe that all of these different data sets are going to come together, help us create a better employee experience, and help us save money, and help us more efficiently use our resources, kind of the triple win.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Peter. One of the things that we're seeing when we visit some of our clients, especially on Mondays and Fridays, is there's 100 people in space, but they're spread against 5 floors. So what is the value for them to come into the office as an employee? Are they getting the natural collisions and the interaction and collaboration out of being there on those low utilization days? So we have seen a lot of our clients really utilize the technology now, even today, to do dynamic capacity planning where they're able to stack their floors in a way where they open up based on the capacity. And that creates that elevated employee experience and frictionless journey in office, because now you have a purpose. Now you have a way to collaborate and have those natural collisions, and maybe even those water cooler talks that we used to have pre-COVID that spark some innovative decisions and innovative creative ideas. So it's really interesting to see that being utilized. Jeff, are you guys doing anything with kind of automating things in your space to elevate that employee experience, utilizing the sensor data, but also integrating it with other technologies?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Peter, about getting that buzz. Like if you have a space that's like a mausoleum, I don't know if that's a good example. Well, yeah, let's go with it. If it's like there's like two people in a floor that houses 50, say, it's going to be depressing. Like I'm here in Canton in our downtown office today, and I walked by the concierge person who was at the front desk, and I asked, and she's like, "Oh, it's super busy today. We've got 3 big meetings, and it's just really crazy." I'm walking around the open office, and it felt like a mausoleum. There was nobody working in the open station areas, but you do it from her perspective. Yes, it is busy because you have people who are in these large format meetings doing their large format meeting things. It's a bit of a missed opportunity. I think it's something we need to look at, as we get into operationalizing this and start to learn from the day to day here and from the sensors and just from observations too, but primarily the sensors. If we had the ability to proactively close 2-3 floors because we knew there were going to be people here in 2 meetings, keep those floors open, close the others. I mean, we're 100%, unassigned self-service space. So, we have the ability to do that. Then you're driving the utilization, concentrating it, you're getting that buzz. People are coming in and you want them to feel like they're in a lively, exciting place. You're using the space to drive people back in as a tool for that. And if they don't experience that, they're going to be like, well, it's great space, but there's nobody in there. It's kind of weird, and the lights keep going off because nobody's moving and, and this and that. So there's an opportunity there. And to your point about other systems, we're going to look at integrating visitor management with PlanOn. With Freespace, we're also looking at integrating our PlanOn system, which is our space reservation system. We're moving through that process, and tying it. There's also the CO2 monitoring for facilities. And then there's a cleaning module as well that we could tie into it for spaces that are more heavily utilized. There can be a notification sent to the cleaning staff. So there's all sorts of operational considerations and opportunities, and we're just really scratching the surface. Like, we're at a really exciting time here. It's a massive experiment, but it's gonna be fun to see what we can come up with and to see the data that comes out of it for sure.
Absolutely. Those operational efficiencies are going to be critical. And I think as a previous FM, I was just super excited to be able to understand what's happening in my spaces and ask the right questions as to why, right? Why are these things happening? And what small changes can we make that have a huge impact on that employee experience and an office journey? Peter and Damien, if one of you want to take this on, what emerging trends should organizations really be prepared for kind of in the coming time?
Sure.
Do you want to, or one of you kick it off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off and Peter can say something. That's that. So in terms of kind of the new trends, I think there's definitely, and this is still emerging, it's around furniture and design. As I said, all of our data is showing that the types of spaces being used now are a completely different proportion to what they were 2-3 years ago, pre-pandemic. I think in terms of other trends, Peter also touched on it, but the whole Google office was everything to aspire for. That's now seen as kind of par for the course, and actually, where do we head now? I think the other trends, and this is probably as part of kind of that employee contract as a result of the pandemic, is around the standards of the environment in the office. So things like Jeff touched on CO2, but particulate monitoring, VOCs, temperature, humidity, etc. There was more of a light shone on that as a result of COVID, certainly around the humidity piece. But we're seeing more and more kind of clients coming to us and saying, how are we going to fit with the fit well, lead well standards, which is something we knew was coming, but I think there's a lot more of a kind of rising from the employees to say, well, how are you going to guarantee that I'm perfectly safe and I've got the optimum environment to work in, and equally the same from the employers themselves, who are saying, well, how do we get the most productive environment? How do we make sure that we've got the right temperature controls? We've got that right level setting of the environment to make sure that we're getting more bang from our buck from a productivity perspective. In terms of kind of other trends, I think trends probably loosely used in this context, but it's definitely how do we integrate more with the existing ecosystems within the office? So how do we get sensors talking to your booking systems, talking to your meeting room panels, talking through to your smart building in terms of heating, lighting, ventilation systems, and just creating that smart building in buildings which are potentially 10, 20, 30, 50 years old, to retrofit and make sure we kind of get that seamless experience. So the old advert that used to go around of kind of wake up in the morning and everything falls into place, including your coffee in your hand as you walk out the door. That's what people are used to, because they've got that home environment that they've had for 2 years, and they're essentially trying to replicate how do I have instant access to everything I need around me. And again, that's very much seen as a couple of clients who are bringing in things like personal post rooms. They're bringing in sleep pods, which we've mentioned here, to essentially get people to replicate their home environment within their existing environment. It's not a case of turn up and do 80% of your work behind a laptop at a desk. It's now, well, I'm going to be here to collaborate and socialize. How do I have a coffee bar on each floor, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's great. Peter, anything you want to add to that? And Jeff as well?
So from a trends perspective, it's going to get really interesting. As we move towards the concept of a smart building, there are two elements. There is, where's the space? What does it look like electronically? And then if I joke, kind of a 70s jive voice, what's happening? Figuring out what's going on. And as I talk about IoT devices in facilities management, I see one of the first major adoptions we're seeing is with companies like Freespace, which helps us know our occupancy. As the technology moves forward, those sensors of all sorts and types are coming on, and there are going to be thousands of sensors in a facility. One of the problems that facility managers happen is they're firefighting a lot, right? Well, what if you could track the current going into a machine to tell you what was going on, or the airflow, or you got a trigger of a sensor that there was a leak before you realize it was on half the floor and tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage. And what we're going to see as we transition to a smart building, more and more use cases of these things to help facility managers be more, have more power. The second thing within that, which is very interesting, I've been in the industry 20 years. When I got involved, facilities management IT was, and I'll air quote, a cottage industry. There have been over $1 billion in acquisitions in the facilities management space in the major systems alone in the last few years. And the major computing powers, which include the Googles, the Microsofts, people that didn't care about facilities now, everyone's now interested that there's a smart building and what can we do with it? And I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of innovation. And in the facilities world, we're going to be beneficiaries of all this technology because you've got a network in your facility already. If you can put the sensors in and ride the existing network or add a new network, it's easy enough. If you can't ride your own existing network and you can know what's going on, you can be much more effective.
Absolutely. And we do have a really good question in the chat. So we have a question that asks, employees often share concerns about privacy and tracking with the use of sensors. How do you message and communicate how and what data gets shared and how is it protected? Is it different in what is shared with executives versus employees? Jeff, do you want to take that on first from your perspective on what you guys have done with your team? And then Damien, we can maybe share some stuff from our clients, our other clients.
Yeah, we've definitely not messaged it to the broader the broader population yet, and how we would message it to the executives when we're delivering information around findings and things like that from the data. It would definitely be different than how we communicate it to the the general. I want to say the general population. That's not the right way to put it. The associate employee population rather. I think we are going to message it, but I think we're going to frame it around, experience and, environmental quality and also sustainability. So if you look at it from a user experience perspective, if I'm an employee, how does this enhance my experience coming into the building? Well, if I know that I'm coming into a building that's a smart building, Peter, like you said, that's energy efficient, well, that's going to be compelling to me as somebody who's coming into an organization, if I'm new, that, that we're taking steps to provide a sustainable place for me to come and work, and the sensors and the information, that's a big part of it. The other thing that comes to mind is integration with the reservation system, and orientation signage. So if I'm somebody coming in and I need to know where there are seats available, like similar to when you go to the airport and you go to the parking garage and you go up to level 2 and it says 241 spaces available here and no spaces over there. You go over to where the little green arrow is and you find your space. We can do that. We can do integration like that with the Freespace sensors, and we have Plan On, but it can work with any number of other types of space reservation systems. It's pretty much ubiquitously compatible with pretty much all of them. I'm speaking on their behalf now, sorry, but I think that's correct. So somebody coming in can look at a screen in the elevator lobby and see that this side of the floor is completely red, so I'm not going to go over there. But if I need a space, I have this side of the floor where I can go find either a touchdown space that's not reservable, or if I'm going to be there for a minute, I can drop a reservation into a longer term station and spend my day there. So I think it's from a user experience perspective, it's always interesting to put yourself in the shoes of a prospective employee, employee that's confused about where they are physically in the space. And what this really might mean to them, right? So if you sell the sensors in that context, or explain to them that they're there with a focus on them and their experience, and not, we don't put them in the bathrooms. It doesn't know who you are specifically. The cat is in this seat. It knows that seat is full of a person, and that's it. You just have to be careful about what you focus on, I think.
Absolutely. I think the key piece to any change management is the why, right? Why are we doing what we're doing, and what's the impact to you? Damien, what have you seen as successful kind of conversations around that?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important to remember that the sensors are tracking a space, and certainly with our sensors, we use a combination of passive infrared, or PIR, or thermal imaging, which essentially means that we don't know who that person is. We can simply see an image and a body moving. There's other sensors on the market which again are optical based, which won't take that image out of the device, but ours are PIR, thermal imaging. I think in terms of getting past that concern, the privacy concern from the colleague, first off, I think everyone's mobile phone, everyone's Apple Watch or whatever is tracking every single movement they make every single day. So I think there's an element of that which needs to be kind of always remembered, that knowing that that's me sitting at a desk is, well, Apple knows exactly where you go to your grocery shop every week. That said, I think in terms of kind of getting that change management piece across, there's a few things. One is just guaranteeing that we don't know that's you, Kat. I don't know that's you sitting at that desk, and we're purely tracking the space, and being open and honest with that. The other piece that we then use is our live signage, and I think that's two pieces. One is that you've got to give something back to the end user. So our live signage, you'll come into the office and you'll see which spaces are available, which meeting rooms are available. Meeting rooms is always a great one, because there's always been a historical stat that you spend 30 minutes a day looking for a meeting room that's available. Using real-time data, you can see, well, the sensor's tracking the space, and I can see that meeting room around the corner is free. So I immediately get something back as an end user. The other piece is, again, showing that on the signage, and one of our global clients, who's got about 500 screens around the world, uses exactly that to show, look, this is a sensor, this is what it does, it's not tracking you, but this is the benefit you're getting. So, and it's just about being open and honest. It's effectively open and honest, and guaranteeing that anonymity. In terms of sharing that data, it's always kind of, we'll always deal with the real estate heads and the senior management to understand who should see this, because a little bit of data in the wrong hands can go completely skew with. But again, that's a case of, when we produce those reports, we're always kind of showing this is what the space is doing, rather than Jeff came in last Tuesday and Wednesday, and I don't know where he was on Thursday, or Jeff was at his desk for 6 hours. But again, I think that also helps with the fact that the industry seems to be moving more rapidly as a result of the kind of return to office because of shrinking, or the desire to shrink workspace, is to get away from those assigned desks. So with the assigned desks, it was easier to understand, well, I can see that Jeff's desk has got activity on it all day. Therefore, I'm assuming that's Jeff there. We don't know that's Jeff. But by moving towards and moving our clients into that kind of hybrid working and unassigned desks, it's a case of, well, we're looking at department level. I know that you've got 10 people in finance seats. I couldn't name which 10 accountants they are, for example. So it's always just a case of being open, honest, and just sharing the data that we've got to an extent, and then not, and we do an awful lot. We actually had some clients the other day, which in fact, Kat, you were on the same call, but we had some prospective clients who were looking to use our data to track individuals, to which we said, look, our technology is not for you. And equally, that's a surefire way to have a mass walkout on site. If you start using the data to challenge, well, Jeff was only there for 6 hours, but Peter was there for 12. Great, but actually you're measuring the wrong thing. You should be measuring productivity and output rather than presenteeism.
And if I could add 2 things, Kat, I think we've gone a little crazy with people worrying about our data. 5 years ago, people knew where people sat. You had a name tag on your desk. Okay, so I think there's the realization of that. The other thing, I've been with ROI 2 years. And when I came here, Freespace is one of our partners. And my wife works at MasterCard, who is a Freespace customer. And my wife's an executive. She works at MasterCard Purchase. And from time to time, she'll have to go to the tech hub in New York City for meetings. And she'll need touchdown space for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes before. And you guys did a rollout there. And you guys did a wonderful rollout. And I asked my wife what it was like. And she goes, Peter, this thing's freaking awesome. I get off the elevator and I know where my conference room is. And I need half an hour to sit down. And I can see this dashboard of the floor plan showing me where these green dots are where I can sit. And it's wonderful and it helps her. But then from her perspective, too, she doesn't mind being tracked because the tech hub for MasterCard has a lot of people coming through and they're coming in and out of meetings and people need to go to break space. Well, the sensor also lets you know when there's someone not at a space, which gives you a place to go to. So also, if you're looking at it correctly, it's a tool that's making your life much easier and it's actually improving the employee experience. And kudos to you and the MasterCard HR team. I think you did a great job rolling that out. But yeah, there definitely, I've seen as a concern of, are people going to know what I'm doing? When truth of the matter is, if you think about it with badge data, we know you're in the building. And there's this other dirty little secret. There's a camera in every facility door that security has that's taking your picture when you come in. They may not be turning on the algorithms, but if they wanted to know who was in the building, they'd already know.
For sure. But to your point, Peter, I guess elevating that employee experience, one of the things that I've seen done creatively is also closing that feedback loop with one of my clients that showcased to their employees the utilization of their stairwells. And the minute that they did that, within the next 30 days, they had an increase of utilization of the stairwell by 20%. Just because they shared the information. Now I'm laughing because it's a little bit of a shame factor, because I know if I would have received that email, I would have been like, yeah, I probably should use the stairs. But it's a nice way to also kind of show that impact to your employees and close that feedback loop and saying, we're gathering this information and we're using it to really elevate your experience in the office, but also have some fun with it, right? And share this information across the board so people understand what is the information being utilized, and then equally use it towards your wellness and your lead certification points, because you are tracking this information and you are able to showcase that as part of your certification application. So really interesting. I think we have a couple of other questions in the chat that have come up. So one of the other questions that I see here is some companies calculate utilization as the head count that visit the office divided by a total number of employees. Others calculate utilization as headcount that visit the office divided by the office capacity. How does your organization calculate it? Jeff, maybe can you give us some insight into what you guys do?
Oh, that's such a good one. We've gone back and forth on that one with different leaders coming in, and some people have one perspective and some have the other. What's really changed, to flip that on its head, is how we're using the space. So before, in the prior model, it was 1-to-1. If your butt didn't have a seat in that office, you weren't working. So you needed to be there to do your job, right? You needed to provide an office, one seat for every person. If you didn't have a seat, you couldn't do your work. Now capacity is very, very different, right? It's the building capacity is, yes, we do have workstations that we put in here, but not very many of them when you think about it. We have a lot of different types of, the space was intentionally designed to provide a lot of different, I'll call them like vignettes of different types of work environments to support the different activities that you might be doing on a given time in your day. And how do you calculate capacity based on that, right? Is a banquette or a little booth that we have, tucked in the corner, is that considered a seat? Not really. It's not really a workstation, but sure, you could sit down there and work there for, some portion of your day if you were in between meetings. When I'm here, I prefer not to sit in a workstation. I kind of bounce. If you had, Damien, if you were to identify me as a dot on the plan, I would be the one that was all over the place, and I'd probably break something in the system by doing that, because I'm all over. But that's, it's difficult because capacity, and then how do you really definitively say, once you've made the distinction between work points, those little places where you can sit down in like a cafe and work point near a window and on a high top seat, or like a work point maybe even in a reception lobby at a couch, right? You can work anywhere. How do you quantify that? What's really truly a work point that you're going to measure versus those definitive workstations? Because we know we have 80 a floor or whatever it is. It's just a number that I'm putting out there, but it becomes difficult, and it's nuanced, and it's not black and white anymore. So depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what the message you're trying to bring forward and what you're trying to say, depending on how your organization uses the space, or or how the leadership wants the organization and the folks to use the space, you could go either way on it. It really depends. Really depends.
To add to that as well, I think, Jeff, you made the exact point there, which is you're running around using multiple spaces at the same time, which sounds odd, but you've got a desk, but you're in a meeting room, and then you're ducking out for a quick phone call during that meeting. So actually looking at badge data alone is great, but technically you're using 3 spaces. So that's where we kind of build it up from the space level. So as an example, you'll walk into the office, and the way that our data would, and you can model this depending on your own kind of policies, but we would say that as soon as you sit down at a desk, we will count that for your entire occupancy plus 2 hours after you leave. So that gives you time to go to your meeting for an hour, go out to lunch for an hour, go and have a couple of calls, or go and desk drop someone else. At the same time, you're in a meeting room at the same time. So that meeting room is saying, well, there's someone also here. And then when you leave that, we would say, well, let's class that as 5 minutes. So as soon as someone leaves that, it's still occupied for 5 minutes because you might need to drop out to go and grab a quick water or something. Same with a phone booth. So what we do is essentially kind of build up from a space level what that space or building occupancy is. So you essentially, Jeff, in a 10 space building could be 30% occupied because you're using a phone booth and a meeting room and a desk technically at the same time, which is kind of that's where our kind of model comes in to say, let's look at it from a space level, apply policies of you can use a desk and a meeting room at the same time, and look at it from that way rather than number of people in a building divided by a number of spaces. Because if you're in a call center, your bum is going to be on that seat for 8 hours a day, give or take. If you're in more of an agile environment, you're in a meeting room and a phone booth, etc., etc. So it's pretty much dependent on the usage of the floor, of the department, of the space itself, to calculate that number. So I'd like to know what the magic answer is. I don't know if anyone has it, but it's a bit of a cop-out from our perspective. It depends on you and what makes sense to you, really.
And within that, you need to think that employee headcount doesn't necessarily work, because now under the new model, there are a lot of people that are full-time remote that just aren't going to come in and use those office spaces. So you might not want to be counting them in that analysis.
Sure. So I see that there's a very active chat going on around the utilization of desk reservation software and how sensors can help kind of implement the use of those applications. And I know that we have some great examples, Damien, but I did want to call out one answer that just made me giggle, that somebody said that you don't get lunch unless you reserve a desk. I might take that one, I won't lie. But Damien, can you share some success stories of really incorporating the employee experience app with sensors and kind of encouraging that deployment and utilization of it?
Yeah, so I think just using app for reservation is great. The app data, if you're trying to use that at the macro level, is always kind of, well, flawed, let's be completely honest, because if you don't say you're coming in, or you do come in and you haven't said you're coming in, or you don't come in and you said you're coming in, the data is redundant. So that's where kind of the sensor data in and of itself is useful. So we enact kind of an auto check-in for some of our clients, that they'll say they're coming in, they'll be reserved a desk, they'll sit at that desk, and it will then say, look, is this you? Great, we'll check you in automatically. Equally, we can just auto check in depending on the client. So that's kind of one use case which kind of drives that behavior. Again, with an app and a desk booking app, it kind of depends what the burning platform is. So we've got one client in their London office who've got 700 spaces and essentially about 2,500 people or employees that are allocated to that building. So there's more of a burning platform there, in that if they don't book a space, they simply don't get let into the building, let alone get lunch, because they won't have a space there. So again, that's where kind of we use the sensor technology. We've got the QR codes, but our data shows us with clients that have the check-in on sensors versus the QR codes to check in, it's poles apart. That we know unequivocally someone's sitting there through a sensor, rather than if they've remembered to scan the QR code before they go and grab their morning coffee. In terms of kind of the other benefits of integrations, and it's with sensors is, and I saw one of the comments on the chat a second ago, is about not only understanding from a utilization perspective, but freeing up resource as well. So one of the examples of conference rooms, which I see Davida, I think, has put onto the chat, is being able to release space based on periods of inactivity. So one of our clients in Atlanta it integrated our sensor technology with their meeting room bookings, and in the first 2 weeks identified 30% of that space was relinquished, whereby it was overbooked and people have either not turned up or left early. So again, the benefits there of kind of using sensor technology with a booking system, be it a desk booking or a meeting room, kind of demonstrates that the opportunity you've got. So by releasing 30% of occupancy in a meeting room to be booked for walk-ins or throughout the day by EAs, etc., immediately gives you more bang for your buck, that you don't need to go and build temporary meeting pods and all that good stuff, because you know you've got the space available underneath you. You just physically need something to automatically tell you, rather than having the age-old graduate who walks around a building for 2 weeks with a clipboard and comes back and tells you, well, this is what I found in 2 weeks, and then you make your global strategic real estate or strategic real estate strategy on it for the next 2 years.
For sure. Peter, do you want to add anything to that as well?
I thought he added it, addressed it pretty well. Something that I just want to mention, I know we're running out and it's a bit of a left-hand turn. The other thing that's really important that we didn't touch on is conference rooms. So everyone wants a conference room because you're going into the office to collaborate. So we've seen a significant benefit with our clients that have put sensors in conference rooms, not to just know is the room being used, and if the room isn't being used, let's have an automatic fill it up, free it up, but to see how many people are in the conference rooms and are we right size? So Jeff, I know that's one of the considerations you guys have made as you guys are doing the rollout, is you've realized that spaces would be used differently. Alternatively, we had another client in the pharmaceutical industry that did a pilot on conference rooms instead of planning them all out, and they wanted them all the same. And there was a tactile surface, and there was a full in the back, and a full whiteboard along one side, and all these things that made things more expensive. and they had a couple sensors in the conference room, and they realized the tactile surfaces were almost never used. The front third of the whiteboard was usually used if it was used. And they were able to make some design changes, which added up to thousands of dollars. And the space was all, you know, the employee experience was better as well. So everyone won.
Peter, to your point, I have a client actually that utilized our information with our thermal imaging module sensors to understand the return on investment for overflow seating, because that's a huge expense. And is it actually being utilized? Are the bench overflow seatings better than some of the other spaces? And one of my clients actually installed the small chairs that have a plug in it with a little desk. And they realized that all of their executives started booking those rooms instead, because their chiefs of staff and admin could actually participate in the meeting and take notes within the room without having to dial in and missing some key pieces of information potentially, because there's a lot of chat going on in the room, because it's not, you know, a hybrid meeting, it's an in-person meeting. So really interesting ways of applying that as well, to your point. Any other questions in the chat? I know we have some really great conversations going, but any other questions? I know we only have a couple of minutes left. Jeff, anything else you want to add from your perspective, kind of from real life examples on what you hope to achieve, especially as we roll out to the rest of your locations and start to look at things holistically from a portfolio view and not just, you know, a certain location?
I'm really interested to see the insights that we get out of this. It's really going to empower us. You know, we talked about decisions, but I think there are going to be a lot of nuanced observations that come out of this that are just going to be interesting. And Kat, we had talked about potentially writing a book about our facilities experiences. I think this is going to add, we could do a few chapters on this too, or maybe another, like part 2 of this series. You know, just as an example, and this was pre-Freespace, but there were a couple of rooms in a building, in one of the legacy buildings. We were no longer in the building. And anecdotally, it was observed that nobody was really using them, right? And we kind of kept an eye on it. We had people go by and, you know, they were complaining that they had no meeting space, but these 2 rooms, nobody was going in there. We found out that we went in there to maybe see why. And both of those rooms had a weird smell, like it smelled like kind of like tacos. And that was not pleasurable to some people. If they're sitting in a meeting, maybe that's not something you want. So, you know, there could be any number of reasons why a space isn't utilized. I mean, maybe you have a conference room and these 4 chairs over on this side aren't utilized. Maybe there's a you know, supply blowing cold air on these 4. So, you know, maybe you adjust it, and it's a simple adjustment. Maybe it's glare coming in the window, and you can do something with a window treatment to fix it. You know, I'm really interested in that. And also, speaking of empowerment, I'm excited to be empowered to call BS on people and their observations around the space, candidly, at any level. And most satisfying would be at the most senior level. Well, nobody's ever here. That's not true, because I have this data. You know, nobody ever uses that, or somebody's always in that conference room. That's also not true, because I have this data. You know, and calling BS is probably not the appropriate term for it. It's probably something.
Yeah, we're among friends.
Exactly. Like you're informing
business
operations and increasing efficiency, or blah, blah, something like that. But, you know, really, you're calling BS. It's going to be exciting to see the insights that come out of it, for sure.
Absolutely. So I know we're 2 minutes away from time. Does anybody want to pop in some last minute questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. I think it's a little quiet.
I just wanted to come back and say thank you for everybody that attended. That was a lot of great dialogue today. Thank you, Freespace, again, for sponsoring this. Great conversation, Peter, Damien, and Jeff. And I hope to see a lot of you in Denver at World Workplace. What do you think, Kat?
I'll be there.
I'm there.
Absolutely.
You might catch Peter and I dancing at the foundation gala, just saying. We're trying to convince Jeff to join us, but we'll see if we can twist his arm.
It's not off the table yet. It's not off the table yet. I'm still working on it.
I got my outfit from Amazon today. It's downstairs.
I have to go.
Ted, we'll rope you into it as well. Just saying, we'll volunteer you.
I'm going to be in stealth mode. But I can't wait to see the picture.
Thank you so much, everybody. This was fun.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Yeah,
Thank you.
All. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
I know.